Good morning. As always, 2 weeks late to the party. I put out a quick little video short 2 weeks ago saying I was going to have a video for you by Friday, and that never happened. So, as you can see, I'm sure Charlie Craven, if he watches this, which he may or may not, because we talk frequently, probably would cringe right now or flinch if he saw my tying area. But that's kind of the nature of the beast when you're tying a lot and you're doing huge numbers of flies. So I'm a little behind the 8 ball all the time. And I like to get out and fish too, so I'd much rather be out there than in here, even though this is kind of a safe haven and a lot of fun for me. So I'm picking up where I left off. I know there were some flies and stuff in the Headbanger series that I had told you I was going to show you some new stuff. So although the streamer bite's been really good on these bigger guys right here and these medium-sized joints right here, these 5-inch ones were killer, but a lot of people don't like throwing these heavy things. The heads on these weigh 3 grams. So I've been getting a lot of questions. I just did doing an order of flies for a guy. I think I just did one, and he's not a big streamer fisherman, pretty green to it, he's never done it before. And the one question that I hear quite a bit is, this is the season for streamers, but pretty soon this isn't going to work anymore, so when can I start fishing them again? That's complete nonsense. So you can fish them all year round, you just might have to pick up and change your tactics a little bit. But flies of this size, for people who are very trout-oriented fishermen who predominantly only fish bugs, I'd say the default thing these days is nymphs, because they're highly effective. You can shorten the learning curve and actually get some positive reinforcement and catch a lot of fish. But when it comes to streamers, I don't know what it is, and I'm totally fine with it. I have a great appreciation for something that not everybody wants to do. But if you're new to this and you want to kind of just start to delve into some of these articulated flies and fishing things that you feel you're going to have greater confidence in, we're going to do, in this video, this is the mini, or the micro. This is as small as I tie it. So in relation to this big guy, which is about a 5-incher, that's the streamer we're looking at, which kind of falls right in place with a lot of the lengths of some of your traditional size streamers. And yes, it is still articulated. We're going to tie this micro today, and as I tie it, I'll talk to you about some of the finer points if you want to weight this a little bit more to get it to dive a little bit more. This isn't as heavy as this guy is, so you may have to add weight to your line, or you can still incorporate a little bit more into this. This would be like what I would consider a finesse fly. I'm going to show you the tying sequence for this. It's super easy. Couple materials, much quicker than one of these, and this has a lot of applications. You can fish these for smallmouth carp. Carp love these things. Trout crush them. Just about anything that can get this in its mouth. So this is the micro. I'm gonna show you how to tie this guy today, and then I'll come back hopefully soon with another video in a week or two, which will probably be 4 weeks. Because I got a couple other cool flies to show you, and I'll get back into that whole Headbanger series. But here's the micro. We're going to do it in that color. It's a brown and yellow, and we'll get going. Alright, so here we go. We're going to tie one of these little guys right here. First things first, I've got a 15mm shank in the vise, and that's one of the smaller ones. Had all those little micro shanks that Flyman is now selling. It's not the smallest they make, but it's pretty darn small. We're going to start off with our thread here, just using a Vivus 140 in brown, and this is real simple. The tail on this is pretty quick. What we want to do is just lay a thread base down, and you can kind of see, if you watch what I just did there, I take my thread at a 45-degree angle and I kind of chase it through that opening, and then I'm going to work on just closing that off. See, I put a little bit of thread pressure on there. Boom. And we're going to start our tail. Our tail and our junction on this is going to be the same. We're going to be using some MFC, mini barred bugger marabou. This is a brown and yellow. I try to take out just one feather. And what you want to do is your tail is going to be roughly that long, which takes up about half of it. So to build a little bit in the tail here, I start right there, transfer my thread forward, and then I will just lock that in place, trim that off, and then wrap right back to where that position is. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one yellow schlappen feather, and all you need is one because you're going to use one for the entirety of this fly. The trick is try and find one that starts, it's relatively straight, but it has a nice taper to it. As you can see, this one here starts at a really fine point, and then it builds up as you work closer to the base. What you don't want is like a super fat wide one on here because it's going to jack up your taper. Once I've done that, I'm just going to take and preen all those fibers rearward. And I'm going to just cut a little triangle there. One wrap's all you need. And then we're going to take some ice dub. And I believe this is like a rusty brown. This is going to be our underbody. If you recall in the larger versions, we use like cactus chenille. But cactus chenille is kind of too much for this fly. Once you've kind of got that in place, now we're just going to palmer our schlappen feather forward. Right up to where the eye is. Two turns over, one in back, one in front. And then we'll build a nice little neat thread head. Do a precision whip finish on there. Trim it. And then I'll use a little bit of resin. You can use head cement, Sally Hansen's, whatever. Right over those thread wraps. Hit it with that. Good to go. Cut yourself a small piece of wire. This is a little longer than what I need. So you have to remember we're doing this. This is much smaller than any of the other ones that we've tied. So the proportions have to be good and in concert with one another, or else it's not going to look right. We're going to put one small glass bead on here, if you can see this. That's all we're going to need for that little articulation point. Right there. Once that's done, you pop that out of the vise. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our hook in here. And the hook that I'm using for this size fly is a number 4 Eric's TP610. Growing very fond of this hook. That's it right there. We're going to start by laying a thread base down right to where the shank ends and your bend starts. And then now what we're going to do is line up our connection, make sure our two pieces of wire are flat side by side. And if you see here, I want the end that has the return for the back loop to be facing up because this is an inverted fly, just like so. So once I've done that, kind of figure where that is. I'm going to start with about 3 or 4 loose wraps, just like you see here. Pull that into place. Once that's good and I've got a half dozen wraps on there, like I said, I got a little too much wire, which is fine. I cut this kind of quickly. Usually I measure these out. Cut it with your wire cutters. And then we're going to do 4 courses of thread, so 2 forward, 2 moving back, as you see here. A little bit tighter on each one. You can kind of see I'm putting some pressure on that thread so the hook's starting to move. And we're going to leave that right there. So now the next tying sequence is just to kind of have some filler here. You can clip this down if you want, but it's really, there's no hook on there, so it's not going to stab you in the hand. We're going to take another piece of that barred bugger marabou. You can talk straight here, Rich. Not enough coffee this morning. Find one that's relatively full, and we're just going to kind of take a look at how that's going to go. We're not going to wrap this, we're just going to kind of envelope it like you see here. Pinch it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's kind of good, and then we're just going to kind of run a course of thread over that. Okay, so that's going to kind of fill that in. Now, if you want this fly to sink a little bit more, this is where I would add some lead wire in here. I don't like to do it before I put the, and it's totally up to you. It doesn't really make a difference. But I don't like to put it on there before I put the wire on when I do my connection, because that can become relatively problematic. And so I'm using a 20 thousandths lead wire here, as you can see. And this is just to add a little bit more weight to it to help keep it inverted. You can see I've got it spooled up on here. Now I'm going to stop this right about where the base of that head is going to go on. Just like you see here. Just going to add a little bit of weight to it. And then I'll take some turns of thread over that. We're going to go back in there, grab our slapping feather, what's left of it. So this gives us a nice natural taper going all the way forward. We're going to tie that off again, do some wraps over it so she don't pull out. We're going to get our ice dub, just like you see here. Wrap it right up to about there. Let's take a look. If you're missing some in there, no problem. Just go back through with a thinner coat. You can even unwrap it just like this. It's kind of what you have to do sometimes. I like the way that looks a little better. Now we're going to wrap our slapping feather right through there, just like you see right here, so that it flows rearward. And then once that's up to our tie-off point, 2 over, 1 in front, trim it off. Now we've got a nice little bit of taper here. We're going to take 1 barred crazy leg, and because this is smaller, you take 1, we're going to cut it in half. Tie half of it on the near side, fold it over the other way, so the rest of it folds that way. You don't even really need this in here, but it just gives it a little bit of extra modeling. It's more for us than the fish. Then we're going to take our brown Arctic fox, which I just had it here. I'm trying to find it now. There we go. So try and find some off the tail that's shorter. You can see here I've got a real short section, so I save it for small flies like this. Okay. Doesn't need to be super long, like less than a couple inches actually. But I like it to be relatively full. This is going to make up our wing. So I cut some of it off. Bear with me here, folks. Big thing with this is to make sure you comb out all that under fur. Alright, like you see here. And then when I'm done combing that out, that's how I'm going to reverse tie this stuff right in there. And that's going to help me out a little bit. So I got to invert it. So I measure that because I want that to bleed into the back like it does on my other headbangers. You don't even have to really call this fly a headbanger because it's not going to hit you in the head. It's not super heavy. So we'll take roughly a half dozen turns over that. Fold that rearward, just like you see here. And I'm going to make sure that I cinch that down, and then coming forward in front of it, and then half hitch it. And then now we're going to take our laser dub, and the key to this one, instead of like on the larger fly, you take 2 large clumps. We're just going to take one, we're going to card it, find that center point, because you don't need as much on here. Remember, this is a much smaller fly. It's all about doing it to scale. And we're going to tie some in on the near side first. Once, twice, 3 times. And then we're going to fold the rest over to the other side. And I'll tell you why I do this in a second. Once we kind of get that in place, you'll see I'm putting a little bit more pressure on here to compress this stuff. And when it's folded off to each side, if you look at it from the top, that's kind of what it's going to look like. And that's going to help me fill in that gap in that space in that head. Once that's done, I'm going to whip finish this real quick. Tie it off. I'm going to take my brush, kind of just brush this out on either side. I'm also going to get my flat pliers, just like you see here. I'm going to flatten this out a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is get some glue. Before that, let me just grab my eyeballs here, because I'm going to have to put eyeballs on this bad boy. So, if you're not familiar with using these heads, you always want to pre-measure these and check them out before you put them on there. So that one's going to fit just right. To get that to stay in place, I'm just going to put a small little drop. Gel on the top, a little bit on the bottom. That's just to get that to stay there, just like so. Now we're going to put our eyeballs on this thing. Make sure the tip of your gel glue is relatively clean before you do so. You only need a little tiny drop. That's it, if you can see it. Not a lot. The eye wells on these mini, eyeball just shot out of my shirt. The eye wells on these mini Sculpin helmets can be relatively problematic because you don't have a lot to work with these little guys. So sometimes what I'll do is I got myself one of these, it's almost like a dentist tool, these guys, and I'll take that on my thumb and move the eye right into place as best I can. Push it right on there. Next thing I'll do is take a little bit of resin, and I'll usually use the thin, and just coat. You don't need a lot. Right over the eyeballs. No, they're not going anywhere. And then what I also do is I pour some down in there. And my furnace is about to kick on. Down into that eye well. And then I cure it, and it's done. And that's the fly. This is the micro. As you can see, this little guy right here, he's got lots of little movement. It's a little smaller. And that's the pattern itself. It's a tiny little sucker. It catches a lot of fish. That's it. I hope you like it. If you do, tell your friends. Give it a like. Share it. And I'll be back with some more. Thanks for dropping in.